There was no final farewell, no funeral pyre, no silent throne left empty beside mine. Zeus did not grow old, and neither did I. Immortality does not grant us happy endings. It only gives us more time to live with what cannot be undone. So when I speak of my life after Zeus, I do not mean that he died. I mean the life I found after I stopped building my entire existence around him. For ages, I had watched the sky for signs of betrayal. Every sudden transformation, every secret journey, every mortal woman who caught his attention became another storm gathering at the edge of my mind. I knew his patterns better than I knew my own peace. That was the cruelest part of his unfaithfulness. It did not merely steal my trust, it demanded my attention. Even when he was absent, he remained at the center of my thoughts. One day, I understood that this too was a form of surrender. My anger had become another throne upon which Zeus sat, so I rose from it. I did not forgive everything. Some acts should not be softened simply because centuries have passed. Time may quiet pain, but it does not transform cruelty into innocence. I remembered the women he deceived. I remembered those I had punished, because it was easier to reach them than to reach him. Their faces followed me more faithfully than Zeus ever had. Io, driven across the earth. Semele, destroyed by a truth she had been manipulated into demanding. Leto, denied rest while carrying children who had done no wrong. Alcmene, punished for a god's deception. And many others whose names the poets barely preserved. For a long time, I had called them rivals. Later, I learned to call some of them victims. That realization did not free me from guilt. It gave my guilt a purpose. I could not return their lost years. I could not remove every wound I had caused. Even a goddess cannot change the past merely because she finally understands it. But I could change what I protected. I became more than the guardian of marriage as men preferred to describe it. I was no longer merely the goddess who demanded that wives remain faithful while husbands were praised for wandering. I became the guardian of the vow itself. A vow belongs equally to every person who speaks it. A marriage is not sacred simply because it continues. It is sacred only when dignity, truth, and mutual responsibility live within it. I began to listen more closely to mortal women. They came to my temples with offerings and prayers. Some asked for husbands, some asked for children, some begged for their families to remain whole, but others asked for courage. Courage to confront betrayal, courage to survive abandonment, courage to leave a home that had become a prison, courage to remain when remaining was their own free choice, not a command forced upon them by fear. In earlier ages, perhaps, I would have told them only to endure. Now, I understood that endurance has many forms. Sometimes, endurance means rebuilding a marriage. Sometimes it means walking away from one. Sometimes it means admitting that what has survived is not the same as what is healthy. I could not always give mortals the lives they wanted. The gods are not as generous as prayers imagine us to be, but I heard them. That was more than many had ever done for me. On Olympus, Zeus remained Zeus. He still commanded thunder. He still spoke as though his desire were a law of nature. He still expected the world to rearrange itself around his will. But something between us had changed. I no longer asked him for the loyalty he had repeatedly shown himself unable to give. I no longer measured my worth by whether his eyes remained upon me. He noticed. Men who mistake devotion for dependence are often surprised when the woman beside them discovers herself. He tried charm. He tried anger. He tried remembering our earliest days, when the world was young and we had stood together after the fall of the Titans. There were moments when affection returned. Not innocence. Never that. But memory has its own tenderness. We had known one another longer than most mountains had stood. We had shared victories, children, wars, punishments, feasts, and silences. There were parts of him only I understood, just as there were parts of me he would never understand at all. Our bond did not vanish. It changed shape. I ceased to be the woman waiting for him to become worthy of his promises. I became the queen who judged him by his actions. And herself, by her own. I spent more time with my children. Hebe, who carried youth with such grace. Eileithyia, who stood beside women in the dangerous hour of birth. Ares, whose violence often reflected the conflict from which he had been born. Hephaestus, brilliant and wounded, who knew too well what it meant to be rejected by those who should have loved him. Motherhood had not always brought out the best in me. There were wounds there too. I had judged my children harshly when they reflected parts of myself I did not wish to see. I had demanded strength from them because weakness frightened me. In later ages, I tried to offer something different. Not softness without boundaries, not love without truth, but presence. The kind of presence I had once needed from my own mother while I waited in darkness. I also returned to the places that belonged only to me. Argos, Samos, the temples where peacocks walked beneath columns and women placed pomegranates upon my altars. There, I was not merely Zeus's wife. I was Hera Teleia, guardian of fulfilled womanhood. Hera Basileia, the queen. Hera, the protector of cities, families, birth, dignity, and rightful order. Before Zeus desired me, I had been divine. After his betrayals, I remained divine. That truth should have been obvious, yet it took me an eternity to understand it. The poets continued to tell their stories. They still called Zeus mighty. They still called me jealous. Stories prefer simple names for complicated pain. But mortals began to look more closely. Some saw the cruelty beneath the comedy of a disguised god. Some questioned why the betrayed wife was mocked while the betrayer was celebrated. Some spoke the names of the women who had once been treated as nothing more than obstacles in a god's adventure. And slowly, I became something different in their eyes. Not innocent, not always merciful, but understandable. I did not ask them to excuse me. I asked only that they see me whole. I had been swallowed by my father, deceived by my husband, defied by my children, feared by mortals, reduced by poets to the worst things I had done in my pain. And still I remained. That word once meant survival to me. Later, it meant choice. I remained on Olympus because the throne was mine. I remained queen because my authority did not come from Zeus's affection. I remained the goddess of marriage because I understood its wounds as deeply as its promises. I remained Hera because no betrayal, no humiliation, and no story told by another voice could take my name from me. There was no life after Zeus. There was something harder, and perhaps more powerful. There was life beyond him. And at last, it was my own.